Well, was he alone? um, the third speaker of this session is, let me look at, is Angela Nuovo. I should get this right because she's my boss since a month. So I'll just read the biographical introduction in order not to make mistakes, Angela. Angela Nuovo teaches book history and library science at this university, and her main research interests are the fields of the history of the book trade and of private libraries in Renaissance Italy. She's been teaching and lecturing extensively in Europe and USA. She's been visiting fellow at All Souls College, University of Oxford in 2012, and the recipient of an Ahmanson Research Fellowship at the University of California, Los Angeles in 2014. In 2016 she has been Gastprofessor für italienische Literatur und Kulturwissenschaft at the Eidgenössische Technische Hochschule Zürich. Among her recent publications are The Book Trade in the Italian Renaissance, published with Brill at handbag prices, and but fortunately there's a paperback that was published a year ago, and together with Professor Christian Coppens she published a book about the Giolito e la stampa nell'Italia nel XVI secolo. In March of this year she obtained an ERC grant for the project nicknamed EMoBookTrade, Early Modern Book Trade, about which she's going to give a talk. Angela, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you all. Thank you for being here. This is the first presentation, public presentation of this project. And of course, I will give you a presentation of the project as it was at the start, as it was presented to the ERC and obtain the financial support of the ERC. The project has already evolved, I can say, thanks to my extraordinary team of researchers. But for the moment, yes, we start from the beginning. And of course, it's been written also very much in connection with the experience of Christina and her group that I was looking with a lot of interest before. The notion that publishing books is both a cultural and commercial activities has underpinned scholarly understanding, at least from the foundational work on the history of the book, L'apparition du livre. Since then, the history of the book has received an enormous boost from the availability of major catalogs and more recently of bibliographical databases of books printed in the first 150 years of printing, enable students to grapple with new questions and issues. Now that it's possible to map place and quantity of production with unprecedented precision, we understand that the traditional concept of bibliographical edition or title, which underpins the construction of databases, is largely inappropriate if we wish to respond to many of the research questions that today seem unavoidable. All attempts at quantification based on surviving copies or titles or editions are liable to be badly wrong, as is shown by a good deal of recent scholarship, starting with archival research. Acknowledging that even large collections only contain a fraction of the books that were produced in the past leads scholars to look for other ways to measure the impact of printed books on society and the effects of the so-called printing revolution. In fact, and I disagree with Elizabeth Einstein, the printing revolution does not consist in a change in the technology of bookmaking, but in the process prolonged over the entire course of the early modern age of the formation of printed book market and the creation of readers as purchasers and consumers of books. Nevertheless, distribution, retail bookselling, and formation of book prices are still relatively neglected aspects of book historical studies. The experience of almost 25 years of research, mostly on archival documents, has allowed me to gather enough material to launch a more systematic attempt to tackle the issue at the core of this project, understanding the economic and political partners of the European book trade in the early modern period. Of course, many aspects of these patterns have already been investigated. The basic problem of book production, starting with the cost of raw materials, the choice of a printable text, and the relationship with the author, the book fairs, and the distribution of books mainly through the Hansa model and the branch model, plus the variety of contracts and agreements between producers and sellers, retail sales, and bookshops, including the second-hand market. Here, Ian MacLean's work in this field comes immediately to mind. This project is designed to be a step or several steps forward in the same direction. The time has come to study books as commodities, confronting all the possible consequences of this approach, which exceed the usual competencies of book historians. Hence, we must learn how to deal with large sets of data, to process them in a correct way, and to make sense of them in an accurate and comprehensive economic framework. The market of printed books was created by pioneering entrepreneurs who in Venice soon became known by the term librai because their most visible activity was precisely that of trading in books, retail and wholesale. In order to prosper, the men of these new merchandise printed books had to have the attitudes and skills of a successful merchant. They immediately began to compete rather than cooperate with their colleagues. Many were unsuccessful and left the field, but bookmen were certainly among the most creative and innovative of merchants. The working tools included the gathering of information on production and cultural consumption in various locations, evaluation of the sale potential of a text, and price fixing. Together with figures for print runs and sales, the price of books is in fact the main indicator of potential access. It is paramount in questions concerning the actual spread of the printed book, its impact on various levels of society, and even the size of the market, but it still awaits systematic investigation. Not only the cost of production, but social, legal, and institutional factors influence the establishment of book prices. The main objective of this project in relation to book prices is to vastly expand the number of sources of data to work on in order to build a truly comprehensive database of prices, which will enable the team, as well as all other scholars interested in the data, to answer historical questions on the availability and use of books in early modern age based on wide-ranging and substantial new evidence. While the project focuses on the economic and legal aspects of the early modern book trade, it will also have an impact on scholarly questions in the wider field of the history of reading and therefore the social history of ideas. As Andrew Pettigrew has recently written, to understand the economy of print is not to turn one's back on the world of ideas, it is a necessary prerequisite to understand that world. A certain number of documents containing book prices survive, and an increasing number of these have come to light over the centuries, but they are dispersed, and the coverage is far from systematic. Fixing sale prices was from the beginning one of the main tasks of the commercial chain: printers, books, publishers, wholesalers, retailers, different roles which could at times be combined in the same agent. One of the key elements of this project is choosing the right sources with which to build a single comprehensive database. The question of book prices in the early modern period is certainly a complex one, and thus this project will concentrate on the period 1540-1630 about, which can be seen as the period where the European book trade came to maturity. Relevant sources for this period are much more numerous and various than for the incunabula and post-incunabula period, allowing a critical mass of data to be gathered. Moreover, during this period, the commercial network of the book trade in Europe was still strongly transnational, with the continuous development of the commerce in learned books in Latin. After the end of this period, the European book market became more fragmented and nationally and linguistically based. For the first time in the field of early modern history, a database will be created in which book prices extracted from a variety of sources will be entered. The sources selected for the database mean that it is mainly books that were put on sale as new books that will be taken into account. This normally means they were sold unbound in loose sheets. In this way, we should be able to avoid the copy-specific features that can influence the price of books, bindings first of all, as we just heard. The database will include the price of any date-specific edition mentioned in the documents. All sources are commercial, and as a rule, no effective retail prices, usually negotiated on an individual basis, are considered, since the data on this is too sparse. An ideal situation is offered by the Plantin archives, where a wealth of information offers the possibility of performing the entire cost and price analysis of a book, from production to sale in the firm's own bookshop. In general, we will take into consideration sets of prices as large as possible, established by producers, booksellers, and trade professionals in general. As our will be the very first database of book prices in the early modern period, it is crucial not only that it is completely available to all scholars for searching and browsing, but also that it is open to collaboration with scholars who are not members of this research group, but who can contribute data from different sources. In this way, the database will be able to grow beyond the limits of the project, becoming an established reference point for every scholar interested in book prices. The database will allow researchers to know the price established for a single book, together with the place and time at which a specific book was valued. There are several research questions that such a database must be designed to answer. Just to begin with, understanding the pricing of a specific edition over different geographic areas, understanding the demand curve of texts, authors, and genres, studying the price of books by taking the price of printed and unprinted sheets of paper, even though, as we know, research on cost of paper is still too scarce today. Studying the influence of privileges on prices, studying pricing according to the language an edition was published in, or the publisher. Were certain languages or certain publishers more expensive than others? For sure, yes. We will see how. Plotting price trends over time by allowing us to verify prices as aggregated groups of data rather than isolated points of data. The type of sources from which the prices will be extracted are 5. First, book trade lists, a number of which are found in probate inventories drawn up after the death of a member of the book trade, together with invoices or packing lists of books. These documents are normally unpublished, and they can contain up to several thousand prices. Second, printed book catalogs of publishers and booksellers. From the early decades of printing onwards, printers and booksellers published lists of books as a way of advertising their holdings, but only about 30% of these printed catalogs contain prices for the books which are listed, for reasons which have still to be fully understood. It must be underlined that, as we have recently learned this morning, although printed, these materials are always rare, often exceedingly rare, and in few cases surviving in only one copy. Therefore, also in this case, the team will rely on a corpus of sources that is basically little known, even to specialists. This corpus includes 75 catalogs with prices mainly produced in Italy and France, often by publishers of the first rank, such as Giolito, Giunti, Manuzio, Estienne, Rouillet, and Colline, in various currencies. Third, the manuscript list for the public sale of one of the largest private libraries of the 16th century belonging to the erudite book collector Gian Vincenzo Pinelli. The sale took place in April 1608. An unpublished manuscript today, the Biblioteca Ambrosiana, lists the content of the library with the evaluation of a single item in the currency of the Kingdom of Naples, ducats, tari, and grani. Pinelli was one of the leading figures in the 16th century Republic of Letters. He is known for having had no interest in expensive bindings for his books. Therefore, the book prices found in this list are probably close to the prices current on the market at the same time of the sale for unbound books. And from this source, we expect to draw data for about 5,000 prices. Fourth, a systematic set of book prices can be found in the early publishers' archive, which has survived from the early modern period, the Plantin-Moretus Museum in Antwerp. From this documentation, we expect to extract crucial data, not only for our database of book prices, but for our understanding of the whole operation of the European book trade in the early modern period. This is an example of one of the documents which are there. Fifth, the stock book of Bernardino Giunti, a document of exceptional importance that holds unique information on the book market in the early 17th century. Its importance can be compared to the Giornale of Francesco De Madis, although it doesn't record sales. Because of this, it is even more useful to our objectives, as it lists books with their prices, regardless of any subsequent negotiation with purchasers. Starting on the 1st of March 1600, the 300-leaf manuscript can be described as the inventory of the books for sale in the Giunti bookshop in Venice and comprises about 12,000 items. The stock book appears to have been written and used over the course of about 12-15 years. It reveals not only the contents of an extremely well-stocked bookshop, but also the publishing and commercial partnerships of Bernardino Giunti, the capable heir of the greatest publishing and bookselling family in Renaissance Italy, with branches in Spain and France. With the exception of the Plantin-Moretus sources, it is, to my knowledge, the richest source of book prices for the period, a sort of general overview of the 16th century book production, which was still available on the market at the beginning of the 17th century, together with its monetary values, assigned by an extremely skilled bookseller. This means that this large list of prices can be relied upon as a consistent system. The identification of the edition in the above-mentioned sources can be, for several reasons, problematic. A database must be built on reliable data. Therefore, the team will privilege the information on books on an edition that can be confidently identified, especially when their prices can be regarded as being established directly by the producers, allowing us to drill down the analysis of prices to the more detailed level of price per sheet. As will be evident from this description, the research methodology basically involves bringing together several parallel data assembly projects under the same umbrella. In this way, we will be able to gather information and data towards a long overdue reconstruction of the early modern European book trade as an economic system. The research team's task is to build basic groundwork of the sort that can establish a structure fundamentally of book prices, which other book historians can draw upon and work with, and to which they can contribute to build up a more broadly data set. In other words, this is meant to be a foundational project that can open the way to a much wider dynamic of cooperation once the basic structure has been put in place. This aspect is essential in order to guarantee the continuing growth of the body of data and to ensure its diversity. The project is located at the point of intersection of two of the classical topics of economic history, a consumption history and price history. One of the strongest points of the project is, in fact, in my opinion, the involvement of an economic historian to address the lacuna which has hitherto existed in the history of the book trade of a thorough analysis of economic data to help with a correct assessment of the accumulated data and include books in the basket of desirable and affordable consumer items in early modern society. As a result of the project, I hope the production, selling, and buying of books should be conceptualized more clearly as an industry by exploiting elements with high explanatory value which have never been fully explored until now, not only quantity and prices, but the effects of monopolies and temporary monopolies like privileges on the whole process of the book trade. The thorough study of the privilege system in Venice is another objective of the project. The privilege system was the first attempt to control the printing sector to take hold in early modern Europe, and it remained the dominant one until the introduction of copyright laws. It gave rise to a juridical and economic model which explains crucial aspects of the development of the book market. It was the privilege system that allowed the book market to grow because it offered investors the guarantee that their investment in an initiative could be protected for a certain period from competitors copying the same initiative. Unlike copyright laws, the system of privileges did not recognize individual rights of authors or publishers, but protected solely the financial investment which was required for printing a book. Through privileges and the laws on printing, the Republic of Venice created a superlative political economy of the book trade, protecting the publishing sector in such an effective way as to sustain it as a sector of high employment and revenues. One of the goals of this sub-project is to create a complete database, freely available and fully searchable, of Venetian privileges for the years 1469, 1603, with a total number of concessions expected to be in the order of 2,000 registrations. The impression for the moment is that the privilege was not requested with the aim of overpricing a newly published book, even if this could, of course, on occasion did happen. But that would have been in conflict not only with the sophisticated and anti-monopolistic mercantile culture of the Venetian government, but also with the commonly agreed concept of justum pretium. A privilege seemed to have been used rather to ensure that through a market free of competitors for a certain number of years, the price could be sustained for a longer time before it started to fall. Finally, the methodology of the project doesn't confine itself to quantitative analysis on a large scale of a series of data, but we also employ a qualitative approach as well as a microanalysis, focusing on what I like to call the human factor in the trade of books. The publication with a detailed commentary of the Gabbiano papers of 1522 is my own sub-project. The main surviving sources for reconstructing the history of the book trade are documents with a highly standardized content, such as contracts, commercial agreements, and bookshops' inventories. Letters in which booksellers express themselves directly are extremely rare in this period, but they were the essential means of keeping business going in distant cities, of managing transnational book sale networks and keeping them under control, while at the same time obtaining sufficient information about what kind of merchandise was needed and where. The letters to Giovanni Bartolomeo Gabbiano were sent to his bookshop at the sign of the fountain near the Rialto Bridge. About 110 letters survive for a single year only, now in the Venice State Archives, sent by 42 different correspondents. Most of them are booksellers, retailers, but there are also relatives, customers, partners, and the manager of the Lyon branch, the famous Lucimburgo or Luxembourg de Gabbiano, the nephew of Giovanni Bartolomeo Gabbiano. His letters in particular reveal the extraordinary degree of market integration which existed between Venice and Lyon. In preparing a detailed commentary and edition of these letters, which are not only full of new information on the nuts and bolts of the book trade, but are frequently written in a very lively style, I will be helped by two colleagues from the University of Udine, Laura Pani and Andrea Bocchi, who will analyze respectively the handwritings and the language of this hitherto unpublished collection of texts. Let me move towards a conclusion. Given the intense and widespread interest today in the economic and legal framework of the history of the communication and publishing system, which stems from the deep crisis afflicting it at present, the time is ripe to attempt to reach a thorough understanding of the earliest formation of this system and to deepen our grasp of its balance between freedom of initiative, temporary monopolies, pricing of goods, access to books, and their impact. Thank you very much.